Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show. Coming up, as the UN Secretary-General calls for net zero a decade earlier, is Britain on track for its existing targets? African countries agree to consider debt relief in exchange for more ambitious climate action. And on International Forest Day, we hear about the role they can play in reducing climate anxiety in the young. Hello and welcome to the Daily Climate Show, the show where we highlight the changes taking place to our world and investigate some of the solutions to the crisis. Now, yesterday saw the release of the latest UN report on the state of the climate, with international scientists saying it presented a final warning to humanity to avoid irrevocable damage. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warns that richer nations may need to accelerate their path to net zero, reaching it as close to 2040 as possible. And with a report last week warning that Britain is off track to meet its later deadline of 2050, how likely is that to happen? Well, earlier I spoke with Helena Bennett from the think tank Green Alliance. She told me there are things we can definitely do to help.
What we can do is try and accelerate emissions reductions now so that in 2040 we're not emitting as much as we are today. So we're not basically staying at the same level of emissions reductions today and then cutting them all off in 2050. We need to start seeing a downwards trajectory today. And you're totally right. Our research has showed that even for what we call the fifth carbon budget period, which is the years 2028 to 2032, in the UK, we aren't on track to meet the target within those years.
So what policies then do we need to implement, not just talk about and put in place, but actually implement to achieve that target by 2040? I know, of course, the UK is doing very well on renewable energy, but what else?
So critically, I think, first of all, in the UK, we need to heed warnings of the International Energy Agency and not start any new fossil fuel projects. So things like the Cumbria coal mine and the Rosebank oil fields, these undermine our targets to get to net zero. And that's just in the UK, let alone everywhere else. There are a variety of policies that we've identified currently sitting in consultation phase or in the ambition phase. So what that means is the government has said, we want to do X, or we're going to consult on X, but we don't have it legislated yet. And that means we aren't able to make any progress on emissions reduction. So a couple of big examples that we've identified. So cars represent the biggest single source of emissions in the UK. The government has started on track to delivering what we know is a zero emission vehicles mandate, i.e. sales targets on car manufacturers to sell electric vehicles. Not yet legislated, and it's been delayed. So we need to see that coming through. But we also need to see things like more public transport and walking and cycling for people to have as options. We need to use less energy. So bringing forward money and policies to insulate people's homes and retrofit people's homes, install heat pumps and solar panels, those kinds of things. And really importantly, there are opportunities across all sectors of the economy in the UK to make savings on emissions through things like changing behaviour and more efficient use of resources and greater circularity. And I think really critically, the biggest thing in my mind is making sure that we're introducing policies and strategies that aren't just going to be ditched by the next government. These policies span decades. Climate change is something that we need to think about in the really long term. We need to be thinking about stuff we're doing today that's going to have an impact in years to come. So we can't keep introducing these piecemeal policies that are ditched immediately by whoever administration we have in power at the time. We need cross-party buy-in in the UK on climate, and we need to make sure that what we're delivering is going to be fit for purpose in the future as well.
Well, Britain has so far cut emissions by around half since 1990, and the government, for its part, says it is a world leader in working towards net zero, but admits the world does need to work faster towards more ambitious reductions ahead of COP28. OK, let's take a look now at some of the day's other stories for you. And African nations have agreed to consider a debt for climate swap deal to reduce their debt in exchange for commitments on climate action. It was among several green initiatives discussed at a UN meeting of finance ministers in Ethiopia that supporters say would boost funds to adapt to climate harms, protect nature and finance local communities. Well, many African nations are on the front line of costly climate change events. The EU is planning on marking an exception to its law banning new cars with internal combustion engines, according to leaked documents seen by Reuters. A law was agreed last year requiring all new cars sold in the EU from 2035 to be zero emissions. But Germany declared a last-minute opposition requesting an exemption for so-called e-fuels generated from renewable sources rather than fossil fuels. The move was criticised by France, who are themselves trying to push through an exemption for nuclear energy. Joe Biden is set to announce 2 new national monuments that will protect more than 500,000 acres of land. The US president will name R.V. Kwame in Nevada and Carson Range in Texas as the nation's newest monuments, ensuring their protection from mining and development. It does, though, come after President Biden approved more drilling in Alaska for the controversial Willow project. Now, today is International Forest Day, a UN initiative designed to highlight the importance of our forests around the world. Well, here in Britain, our forest cover is among the lowest in Europe, depriving many of us with the positive mental health benefits of spending time in woodlands. And that's something the Woodland Trust is working to improve. And the Chief Executive of the Woodland Trust, Darren Moorcroft, who joins us from Derbyshire, is with me now. Now, Darren, it has been a bleak assessment this week as far as the IPCC is concerned. You've got some research out today about climate anxiety among young people in particular. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right. We've commissioned a YouGov poll, and that's shown quite worryingly just the scale at which young people are feeling that climate anxiety. So 1 in 3 young people in the UK feel they are scared or pessimistic about climate change and really feel worried about the effect that climate change is going to have. And we know, as you've said, on this very special day, and we would say every day of the year is an International Day of Forests, 9 out of 10 people recognise the real benefits of getting out into green space, into our woodlands, for those physical and mental health benefits.
Yeah, so tell us more about that. I mean, how does spending time in woodlands help us?
I think the range of benefits that you get, it can lower your blood pressure, it can help to create an atmosphere for you where it can calm you down if you have that anxiety. And I also think, one of the key things that the Woodland Trust does is establish new woodlands. So we've established over 8 million with young people of the 55 million trees that we've established through our history so far, and we want to do even more. And the really important thing that does is it gives people a connection and it gives people hope because they're taking positive action. When a youngster is putting a tree in the ground, what I would say they're doing is they're creating a connection with nature, a connection with the battle against climate change, but also they're going to create something that's going to last for generations. So their connection might be a lifetime. The habitat that they create will be generations to come.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way of putting it, isn't it? Well, of course, there has also been a lot of very worrying stories about tree felling recently. Are we actually making improvements on woodland cover in the UK?
I think it's definitely a work in progress, and it could do better if I was marking the report card. I think as a society, as government particularly, we have to drive those numbers up in terms of the area of woodland cover that we have. As has been said, we've only got 13%. If you compare that to mainland Europe, they're closer to sort of 42, 43%. And it just shows that when you have a technology, if I can call it that, a natural solution for both climate change and for biodiversity, the biodiversity crisis, as well as helping people with their mental health and physical health, we need to get more of it out into the countryside, as well as out into the streets where we live.
Darren Moorcroft, Chief Executive of the Woodland Trust. Good to have you with us on The Climate Show. Thank you. Now, before we go, just a reminder that you can hear the latest episode of the Sky News Climate Cast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. You can subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts. Well, thanks for watching. That's all from us for today. Bye-bye.